Hey guys, what is up, and I welcome each and every one of you to a new League of Legends video. So many people have been asking me, and just overall in general, what exactly do I do with Yasuo now? What are the best items, the runes, which masteries do I take? And it seems like most people are somewhat confused and more or less just want to know what is the answer to these questions. So hopefully this video serves that purpose in answering your questions, and that at the end of this video you'll have a better idea of what type of Yasuo build you should be running. So throughout this video I'll be talking about 3 different Yasuo builds that I think are all more or less equally viable. At the end I'll tell you guys which is my personal favorite build at the moment, but again you can just simply choose whichever one you think will fit your playstyle more. So when talking about Yasuo and Season 6 and all the changes, the first thing that definitely comes to mind is what masteries do I take? Or better yet, which keystone is the best now? Well, let's talk about them very quickly. So first off, we have Warlords Bloodlust. Now at first this seemed to be the absolutely ridiculously overpowered mastery for Yasuo because it simply procced on everything you would hit, whether it's monsters, minions, or champions. But now that it got nerfed to only working on champions, well, it's not really as good anymore. Now you can't really go wrong in taking it, but I don't think it's the best option as of right now. Then we have Fervor of Battle, another very popular Yasuo mastery as well, but unfortunately very recently it also got the same treatment as Warlords Bloodlust. It now works only on champions whenever you're trying to gain the stacks. So again, much like Warlords Bloodlust, this isn't really all that good anymore, even though before the changes I actually thought this was very strong. So the only time I would ever recommend taking this mastery is if you simply just adore getting Blade of the Ruin King on Yasuo. If you do, this is not too bad, but if you don't, I don't recommend taking this one. And the final and third keystone mastery that we'll talk about is definitely Thunderlord's Decree. I think this is by far the best mastery to take on Yasuo and almost honestly every single champion in League of Legends at the moment. It just recently got buffed, the damage on it is insane, it works with Yasuo very well, it helps your laning phase a lot, and it really is just a flat out very strong mastery. So as of right now, of the 3 masteries, I highly recommend taking Thunderlord's Decree, but again, it comes to personal preference. And I'll give you guys a full mastery build path when we talk about the actual builds later on in the video. So let's move into the actual 3 different builds we'll be discussing. Now all 3 builds really just stem from the first 2 items that you decide to go on Yasuo, because it really just decides what kind of build path you're choosing to do. So the first build path is going to be combining Static Shift and Trinity Force. Since the recent changes to Triforce gave a 20% crit chance, this is now definitely viable. And to me, this is the hybrid in tankiness and damage type build. Following that, we have the more or less famous Static Shift into Infinity Edge, going for the full out assassin burst type damage. This build is still of course the king when it comes to just burst damage and overall just eliminating squishies in the backline in teamfights, more or less like an assassin. And the final and newest Yasuo build is going to be combining Trinity Force and Phantom Dancer. I'm excited to talk about this build because I think this one has a lot of potential, but we'll get into it just a bit later. So let's start things off by talking about the Static Shift and Triforce build. So the starting items throughout all the builds are the exact same. You either go with the Dorans for the more slightly aggressive start, or you go Boots to make your E's a bit faster and for the extra potions in the lane. And of course, since I'm sure a lot of you are wondering, here are the runes and the masteries I would personally run if I'm using this build. So I personally have attack speed Quins, flat AD reds, armor yellows, and flat MR blues. Against an AP champion, you can switch out the yellows with HP per level. Now the thing I love about Yasuo is that you can definitely switch around the runes, and chances are it'll still definitely work if you play it better that way. Such as switching out some of the Quins for maybe more flat AD, maybe a bit of lifesteal, or whatever you please. Now the core items I have listed should be self-explanatory, and you can definitely get different boots depending on what you're facing or what you prefer. Like for instance, sometimes I prefer the boots of speed for the faster E dashes. And for the other options, it doesn't matter too much in what you choose. Again, it depends on what you're facing. So now the beauty of this build is that it really is just the best of both worlds. You have an all-around great build that has a decent cost in terms of the items. It provides decent damage regardless, of course not as high as going Shiv into IE, but it is still very much there. But on top of that, you're also not as squishy as going Shiv IE, for instance, because you do have the phage from the Trinity Force. The Triforce also makes you a lot more mobile, so therefore it means you'll have more of your passive. You still have the beauty of Static Shift when it comes to wave clear and just the potential AoE type damage in teamfights. You still have good dueling power with the Triforce. You have decent assassinating power with the combination of both of these items. You can take down towers as as well because of the sheen effect. And like I said, all around a very solid hybrid type build. The cons of this build, it goes without saying, the damage is of course not as high as Shiv and IE, and it doesn't snowball as hard as those items as well because you just don't have that damage. But it is overall a safe build path that should work in more scenarios than it doesn't. So that right there is the first build that I'm talking to you guys about. The next one we'll talk about is going to be the static shift into the Infinity Edge, a very popular and more or less quote-unquote standard build for Yasuo. So the starting items and the core items more or less are the same, just except for the Triforce you have the Infinity Edge. There shouldn't really be a whole lot to say about this build except for the fact that after you have your core items, you can definitely get some defensive items like maybe Maul Malmortius, or even something like Guardian's Angel or Death's Dance, Mercurial Scimitar based on what you're facing. You should still definitely have more than enough damage. And here are the runes and masteries for this build as well. As you can see, they actually remain untouched. Mainly because I like these two pages quite a bit and they personally work for me. Now in terms of discussing this build, there really shouldn't be a whole lot to say of things that you don't already know. I mean, this build clearly has the highest damage of all three builds and just Yasuo builds in general. It snowballs the hardest. It also is very cheap now when compared to getting a Shiv and Triforce or a PD and Triforce. The bonus crit damage offered by IE is simply unmatched and works fantastically with the lightning proc from Static Shiv. And again, this is more or less the assassin type build. Now the cons of this build, you are very squishy compared to the other two builds because you don't have a whole lot of tanky items prior to getting your items after the BT. So you have to play it very carefully, pick and choose your fights very carefully, and you have to avoid any mistakes because one mistake can lead to your death based on how little HP and resistances you have. And next, let's talk about the final build, the Triforce into Phantom Dancer. Since this is a relatively new Yasuo build, I will be comparing it with the Static Shiv and IE in terms of damage and overall stats provided. So before we actually go into the items themselves, here are the runes and the masteries for this build. You can see that they are a little different. This is a very cool build when it comes to calculating your effective HP, which more or less just takes into account everything that you have, such as your overall HP and your MR and armor. And lifesteal makes this even better. So for this one, I have 2 lifesteal quints and 1 attack speed quint, flat AD reds, flat armor yellows, and MR per level blues. And I still go 18 in the cunning tree, but this time I put 12 points into the resolve tree. And the main reason for that is for runic armor in the 3rd line within the resolve tree because it increases your lifesteal and it also makes all shields on you much more effective. So with this build, you'll have your shield from your passive, you'll have your shield from BT, and you'll have your shield from Steric's Gauge. So there's a lot of synergy within this build because not only does that mastery work so well with all these shields, but Steric's Gauge works very well with Triforce, increasing the Sheen's damage and overall just giving you a lot more resistances. And the reason you go Phantom Dancer is because this makes you not only a dueling prowess, but the move speed from PD makes your shield come up more often from your passive, and the damage reduction overall makes your effective HP even higher. So if you combine everything together, well, you're just a really hard Yasuo to kill that still deals quite a bit of damage. As for the other items, I highly recommend a Dead Man's Blade if you can and the enemy has a lot of AD somewhere near the middle of the build. If they have a lot of magic damage, Mercurial Scimitar is fantastic thanks to the extra lifesteal it provides, and if they have not a lot of either or you're just really ahead and you want to snowball even harder, the Hydra is also quite fantastic for the extra lifesteal on top of everything else and for the nice auto attack reset. So like I said, this is a very new build, but I feel like it has so much potential. There's just so much synergy within the items and the masteries that is just so awesome. Now the bad thing about this build is that you obviously do not have Static Shiv, and the lightning effect from Static Shiv is just really cool. It does a lot of damage and it gives you nice wave clear. But this build excels at not only being a great duelist because of just how much effective HP you have and the PD for dueling, but you're also quite strong and a big disruptor in teamfights because you still deal good damage and you're very hard to kill. And a user on Reddit called Lichtgestalten compared these two builds, Infinity Edge and Static Shiv, and Phantom Dancer and Triforce. And the end result is of course just proving the fact that IE and Static Shiv does more damage than the PD and the Triforce. But it's more a matter of how much more damage does it do, and is it worth the extra utility and overall tankiness you're losing by going the route of IE and Static Shiv. So the final part of this video, which is my personal favorite build and which one do I prefer playing of the 3? Well, if I had to choose one, it'll definitely be the Shiv and Triforce build. Again, it is just too well rounded for me not to like it. But the lovely thing now is the fact that you can easily switch up the builds midway through a build. So for instance, you can be going for the Shiv Shiv Triforce, and after you finish the Shiv, if you realize you're snowballing really hard, you can instead go for the Infinity Edge. But the third build that I talked about, the Triforce NPD, is one I'm still keeping a very close eye on and practicing it even more because I think this one has an insane amount of potential because there's just so much synergy within the items. But that is about it for this video, guys. If you did enjoy this one, definitely hit that like button to show your support. Let me know down below which is your favorite build and which one you like playing the most. Make sure to check out my other videos as well, like my Is Poppy OP rework video guide explaining how to play her. Subscribe if you haven't, share the video with your friends, and I'll see you for the next one. Peace.